Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, your host here at Behind the Star. And I say this every week. If you missed last week, go back and listen to it. We had a really good time. I shouldn't say last week. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. But we were with Sergeant Wayne Lenahan. He was telling us all about the OCSO bike school. It was a fun episode. If you're into biking, if you're not into biking, go back and listen to that one. But this week, I'm on location. I'm out of Central Ops, and I'm over in Sector 3. Since I started this podcast 2 years ago now, I've been trying to go to every sector to talk to the captains, kind of get their take on what it's like working in their sector. And I've actually been to this sector. I've been to Sector 3, but back then there was a different captain. So there's a new captain here, and it's Captain Dennis Ela. Welcome to Behind the Star.
Well, thank you, John. Glad to be here.
And this is your second appearance on Behind the Star.
It is.
But this is your first time solo.
It is.
Yeah. I think only Sheriff Mina has been on twice, and so he might have been on 3 times. And so you're getting up there in how many appearances you've made on the podcast. So Captain Ela, I want to start off because, as I said, I was here a few almost years ago now to talk to Captain Tony Marlowe. He was the captain of Sector 3. He's still at the agency. He has another job now here at the Sheriff's Office. And you were brought in to work here in Sector 3. How long have you been here in Sector 3? And maybe explain where Sector 3 is for people that don't know.
So I was assigned here in late January of this year. And Sector 3 is a large geographic area. The broad range would be essentially John Young Parkway on the eastern border to the Lake County line on the western border. Silver Star Road is more or less our northern border, and there's places where we extend down to Osceola County on the southern border.
So it's big. I mean, it's a big chunk of Orange County.
Yes, it is.
So we've also talked to Sector 1 Captain Joe Carter, and I think you two probably work together a little bit because your sectors sort of butt up against each other, and people probably live in one and work in the other. But do you work with him a lot?
Oh, yes. And I have worked, with Captain Carter and other assignments as well. We know each other well.
And so, like you said, you started here in January as a captain in Sector 3. Tell me a little bit about that process, because this is the first time I assume you've been sort of the head of a sector. What was that sort of transition like?
Fast and furious. Yes, sir. There's a technology is an ever evolving thing in the world, and it certainly is in this industry. There are a lot of technological advancements that have taken place within the patrol division that I had never touched before, or never heard of, or never seen. So steep learning curve, administratively from the onset, but I've been blessed with a lot of assignments and a lot of leadership opportunities since I've been with the agency. So dealing with the people that I work with, it's the same everywhere. It's just learning the administrative tasks is the steep hill to climb in this assignment.
So tell me about that. So 10 months you've been here. I mean, what's your day like? You get in at, I don't know what time you get here, but what time do you get in? And what's sort of your normal day like here in Sector 3?
What time I get in kind of depends upon what the tasks of the day are. But typically I'll be in the office by 8 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of administrative reviews of different actions that personnel who are assigned to this sector have undertaken in the last few days. We spend a lot of time reviewing the actions of our folks to make sure that what they're doing is within policy, within law, and is they're acting in an ethical and a professional manner. So there's a lot of that. There's times when I just pack my stuff up and I go out in my car and I pretend that I'm a police officer again. And there's a lot of obviously internal meetings, staff meetings, things like that. But there's even more so a lot of community interaction, a lot of community meetings. I attend approximately 6 meetings a month with different community groups. And then there's some ad hoc meetings as well that aren't necessarily scheduled, but different communities that want to talk to a representative of the sheriff's office and talk about their concerns and ask how we're helping to solve some of those issues.
So why is that important? Why is it important that you go to these community meetings?
Well, I mean, I'm the face of the sheriff's office for Sector 3, and something I take very seriously is the sheriff has empowered me and appointed me into this position. And I believe that I serve the citizens of this community, and the citizens of this community should hear it straight from the horse's mouth what is being done for them. And they should also have the opportunity to talk directly to me about what their concerns are. I can look at statistical data, I can look at reports, I can look at things, and I can get an overview of what's going on in the sector, but to talk to the folks in the community directly, oftentimes it opens our eyes to things that we're not even aware of. And it also helps, when I can hear those concerns, and then I can get back with them in a few days, a week, a month, depending on what the problem is, and tell them what we did about their problem. It builds that trust, and it builds that faith that, hey, they do listen to what our concerns are, and they are taking those seriously and trying to improve our quality of life.
So when you go to these meetings and you talk to these folks, what are some of their typical concerns that they tell you?
Believe it or not, one of the single biggest concern I think it is as an agency, not just in Sector 3, is traffic.
Really?
Yeah, it's speeders and reckless drivers and things like that. And, school just started a month and a half ago. That always kind of restarts or elevates those complaints because the school zones, the massive traffic going in and out of schools with drop off and pickup of kids. So that is overwhelmingly the biggest voice concern by every community.
And they want you to just be out there patrolling and making sure people aren't going 100 miles an hour in a school zone with their phone out?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's a lot more complex than that. I mean, you can figure that your average elementary school has 800 to 1,000 kids, and Orange County is a no-bus school unless you live excess of 2 miles from the school. So if you have 800 kids that have to come in between 8 and 8:30 in the morning, and you have 800 kids that have to get picked up between 3:15 and 3:45 in the afternoon, wherever that school is physically placed, it's going to severely impact traffic. It's going to severely impact the residents that live in the immediate area. So we work collectively and collaboratively with the school board, with the county traffic engineering. We're constantly trying to find a better way to handle these problems, and it's a collaborative effort. It isn't just the sheriff's office. It's all of the county entities kind of coming together.
I think that's really interesting because I would assume, the biggest concerns would be, shootings and robberies and drugs. And not that those aren't concerns, but the big concern, one of the big concerns is traffic. And we actually go out and work on it because I think that probably affects a lot of people who live in a community because they're the ones that are driving. They're the ones that are sort of going to and from work and by the school. And you have to think about that as the captain of the sector because, as you said, that is one of the major concerns of people out there in the community.
Yeah, so, the best way to put it is I have this pool of resources that's assigned to me. And I have to evaluate the concerns of the community and hear what the majority of the concerns are. Obviously, life safety, things like that are always going to take precedent. That's where our resources are going to go to impact. Outside of that, I have to decide and kind of triage those issues and deploy my resources to handle those issues as best I can. So hearing from the community helps me do that.
Yeah. And so before you got here as captain, why don't we go through your career a little bit? So when did you start here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office? And did you grow up here in Central Florida? Did you move here like I did?
I started here a very, very long time ago. I started here as a reserve deputy in 1995. I was hired as a full-time deputy approximately 4 months later after I had finished my FTO program. And I started in uniform patrol, midnight shift, Sector 4, which is the South Orange Blossom Trail area. I've had a lot of opportunities since then. I've worked problem-oriented policing units, which is essentially community-oriented policing units, gang unit. I've worked in tactical patrol units. I've worked in SWAT for a number of years. I've worked in specialized patrol, so I had canine, mounted, dive team, marine patrol.
A little bit of everything, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I've been blessed with a lot of really great opportunities since I've been here.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in New England.
Okay. All right. How did you end up here in Florida?
As a young man, I had discovered, in my late teen years, what my calling was, or what I thought my calling was. It was to be a police officer. And being a young man back then, if dating myself, so we're going back to the late '80s. There was a show on called Cops.
Yeah. And it recently put back on the air as well.
Yeah. So being young and adventurous and enthusiastic, watching that show, which a great deal of it was filmed in Florida.
Yeah, at Daytona Beach, I think a lot of times.
Broward County mostly.
Yeah.
It just, I was from a sleepy little town, kind of a agricultural community of 2,000 people. And it just didn't seem like the place I wanted to go where stuff was happening. So I picked up and loaded my car up and drove to Central Florida, and that's where I've been since.
Why'd you choose Central Florida? Why'd you choose Orlando?
I had some friends that were in the area, and I was I shouldn't say somewhat, slightly comfortable with it, because as a kid we had vacationed here a few times when I was a kid, right? The typical theme park vacation. And when I came down here, I actually made friends with a few people that were Orange County deputies, and did some ride-alongs and got to see the agency a little more. And I decided this was the place I wanted to be. This is the only application for employment that I dropped.
Oh, well, that's good. We hired you.
You did.
And so you said you started off in Sector 4. What do you remember about those first few years working patrol in Sector 4?
So again, a sleepy little agricultural town, right? You didn't hear a siren where I grew up. There were no shootings. There was no anything. So when I was put out on my own, I can remember being terrified, because it was a totally different world. It was culture shock. But still, that sense of fear or anxiety, but still, I knew very quickly that I had made a good choice with the organization and where I was working, and I knew that this was for me.
What did your family think about you leaving your small New England town, moving to Florida, and then working in South OBT?
I don't know that, I've got kids of my own, and I don't know that that's any parent's dream. But, supportive. My parents are both folks that just were really happy that I found something that I was passionate about, and something that gave me pride and pleasure to do. So the normal, of course, they're nervous. They still are.
Yeah.
But happy that I had found something that I enjoyed doing.
So you said, you've worked in Sector 4. You've done all these jobs around the Orange County Sheriff's Office, which many of them I've highlighted on the podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to some of those other ones, go back and listen to those. But then you got assigned here to Sector 3. What did you know about Sector 3 before you got assigned here? And did you work in this area at all, or did you know it at all, or was it sort of just throwing you in the middle of it?
I knew the area. In different assignments throughout my career, I had worked Sector 3 when I was in a problem-oriented policing unit in the late 90s.
Wait, what is that?
Problem-oriented policing.
Okay.
So that's what we were called then. It's essentially what our community-oriented policing squads are now. Different name, same task.
All right.
When I was assigned there, I was assigned to Pine Hills. So we bridged Sector 1 and Sector 3. We worked Pine Hills all the way over to Lee Road, Forest City Road. So I worked a lot in the Pine Hills area. There was another time when I was assigned to an auto theft recovery unit that we worked a lot in Sector 3. We worked a lot in Pine Hills. We worked a lot in throughout the area. So I'm very familiar with the terrain.
So going back to January, or maybe a little earlier, when I assume somebody came up to you and said, Lieutenant Ela at the time, right?
Yes, sir.
We want you to go work in Sector 3 and be assigned over there. What did you think about that? Did you think that's something you wanted to do, or were you kind of like, I've never been a captain of a sector. I don't know how that's going to work?
So it was both. There was a few weeks, I think maybe 2.5 weeks time between the time that the sheriff called me and I met with the sheriff and he told me that he was promoting me. There was about a 2-week period there where they were shuffling some folks around, some reorganizational things with the promotions. between the time he told me and the time I knew where I was going. But in that 2 weeks, of course, many of my friends, many of my peers said, "Oh, where do you want to go? Where do you want to end up?" And it was universal across the board. It was, I want to go to patrol.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, you know, when I got promoted to lieutenant, I was sent back to patrol, and I hadn't been in patrol for several years when I was sent back.
And we should explain, when you get promoted, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when you get promoted, a lot of times you have to go back to the road, and you work like late hours or early mornings, like you have to work midnights, right?
Yes, as a lieutenant, up to lieutenant, you're pretty much guaranteed to go back to patrol, and it's going to be a midnight shift.
Okay, all right.
But I hadn't been in patrol for several years, and I found that time when I went back to patrol, interacting with our new personnel, our young deputies, I was so impressed and so giddy to work with them because their enthusiasm was high, but they were a lot more intelligent and a lot better at technology and resolving issues than I ever was. So I really enjoyed that. So moving forward to being promoted to captain, I wanted to come back because I wanted to get back in touch with the youth of the agency and experience that again.
And was this like the one opening, Sector 3, or were there others at the time?
This was the only opening because of a transfer. Like you said, you were here a couple of years ago. Captain Tony Marlowe was here. He was being transferred to another division. And so this came open, and you know, that made me happy because I like the area.
So when you first started and up to now, I mean, what have you sort of learned or discovered about Sector 3?
You know, the opportunities that I've had here to interact with the community and go to small community meetings, you know, not just Pine Hills, but individual little parts of Pine Hills and Orlo Vista and Southwest Orange County, which when I started here was just Groveland.
Yeah.
And it is a boom, you know, Horizons West is a booming metropolis almost now. To meet with all of these folks and get to know them and them get to know me. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned since I've been here is not really learning, but making those connections with folks and developing those relationships so that they feel comfortable contacting me if they have an issue, and vice versa. I have no problem picking up the phone and calling any number of dozens of folks that I know well now and saying, hey, we're having this problem. Can you put your flyer out to your group? Can you put out your email? Can you do these things and help me resolve this issue?
I would imagine, and you just listed a bunch of neighborhoods. If you're familiar with Orange County, you know, there's Pine Hills or La Vista. Horizons West is like a new area where, as you said, it used to be basically orange groves, and now it's houses and public shopping centers and restaurants and all that. But I would assume their concerns are different. I mean, are they, because you have such a large area and a different demographic of both of those sort of sections of your sector, I would assume the concerns are a lot different between the different parts of your area.
So there are different problems, but the concerns still are overwhelmingly traffic.
Okay.
It's amazing. Yeah, but different geographical areas have different problems, right? If you look at something that's been around, a neighborhood that's been around for decades and decades, like Pine Hills, for example, it's very dense. They have different issues of crime than Horizons West would have, for example. But overwhelmingly, when I talk to these folks, it really does. It comes down to, you know, people speeding through their neighborhood, driving aggressively on their roadways. And, you know, as a parent, I understand that. I mean, I live in a small neighborhood, and my kids play out in front of the house. They play out in the street if I don't want people speeding through my neighborhood. Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about Pine Hills, because I think a lot of people here in Orange County and Central Florida, you know, they see it a lot on the news, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, there are crime issues in Pine Hills, but I would assume that as you've kind of done this job, you've met a lot of people in the community that, you know, they're really concerned about what happens in their community, and they want to make it better as well.
Yeah, so I could speak to that from a historical perspective. Like I said, I worked Pine Hills back in the late 90s, and it used to be referred to as the Wild West. And I can remember working in Pine Hills, and you couldn't go through a shift with your windows rolled down and not hear gunfire.
Really?
You know, but what we didn't have then that we do have now is a lot of these community meetings that the sheriff's office is actively participating in. The communities didn't come together in these groups like they do now, and the sheriff's office didn't have the opportunity to participate in these meetings. So what I find now is if you look at, I'm going to be statistical cruncher here. We're down, 26, 28% from what we were last year at this time. And that is a multi-year decline in reported crimes. Yes, crime still does occur in Pine Hills in every community.
Yes.
But the reduction is significant. And I often get asked at some of these meetings, why do you think that is? And I remind folks at those meetings, it's because of what we're doing right now. We're developing these relationships, and you have direct contacts within the organization that you can contact with your concerns. And I have direct contacts in the community that I can contact with my concerns. And, everything works better that way. And really that's what's changed with the intelligence-led policing models and the community interaction is really, to my mind, what has reduced crime to the levels that it is now.
And I know Sheriff Mina talks about this a lot. You know your neighborhood better than anybody else usually does. I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I know basically the people that live in my 3 streets, and, I see cars here and there, and we walk our dog, and if something kind of odd is happening in my neighborhood, I know about it much faster than maybe a deputy would. And I think that's probably the same way in Pine Hills. And when you have that sort of interaction with people more often, if you go to their meetings, they see you, you see them, I'm sure they're a little more likely to come up to you and say, hey, 5 houses down, these people moved in, and it just doesn't seem right. Can you guys check it out? And I'm sure that's a lot easier when you have that open communication.
Oh, absolutely. And then the follow-up to that is that, within the next several days, I'll actually reach back out to that person and let them know, hey, listen, we looked into that and this is what we found. Or I understand why that didn't feel right or look right, but this is what it actually is. There's really nothing to be concerned about. So it goes both ways. So we can't just be an entity that receives information and not give feedback, right? So that relationship is developed by us receiving the complaint or the concern, but then following back up with the folks and letting them know that, hey, that didn't just fall on deaf ears. It's not sitting in somebody's inbox, not getting handled. But we actually did look into it, and this is what we found, and this is how we've resolved that issue.
And people like to be heard. They like to know that you took their concern seriously. Whether or not something happens, they like to know that you actually went out there and I don't want to say it in a bad way, but did your job.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's who we work for. Mm-hmm. That's who pays our salaries. Mm-hmm. That's who empowers us to work within their community. And, we are public servants, so we have to be accessible to the public, and we have to hear their concerns, and we have to make our best efforts to address those. Not everything that I receive is a police matter or sheriff's office matter. But we have great relationships with our other public partners, whether it be code enforcement or the commissioners. I have a regular interactions with the commissioners that lead my area. Whether that could be the fire department, it could be any number of county partners. If it isn't my ball, then I will reach out, but I will also connect the person who contacted me with the proper resource before I bow out. I want to make sure that they're getting served. And
I should have said this at the beginning. We're in Sector 3, and I did say that, but Sector 3, the quote-unquote headquarters, the substation here, it's in a COE on Story Road, and it looks like a court because it is a part of the Orange County court system.
Yes, this is an old building. There's only one other like it, and you visited Captain Carter, and his building is an exact duplicate of this. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So if you're wondering kind of where the substation is, it's on Story Road. There's a big auto auction nearby. You really can't miss it over here. So how many people actually work out here as deputies, roughly?
I am allocated fully staffed with 130 people. So that's mostly sworn. There's a few civilian positions in there, right? Our field service officers, our public service officers, administrative personnel. The overwhelming bulk of that, fully staffed, is 130. Probably 124 of which are going to be sworn personnel.
And we're always hiring. So if you want to come work at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, we're always hiring. So now that you've been here 10 months, you've probably seen some positives, some negatives. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges you have as captain of Sector 3?
Some of the biggest challenges that I have are getting some of the smaller communities to buy into this relationship, right? And the county has a program called Safe Neighborhoods that we work with a lot. And Pine Hills has a Safe Neighborhood Committee. Orlo Vista has a Safe Neighborhoods Committee. There's several throughout the county, but those two are within Sector 3. There's other small communities that we've had face-to-face multiple meetings with the county representation to try to get them to buy into that and get somebody or a couple of folks in that community to stand up and take that administrative task on, because this isn't stuff that we do for them. This is stuff they have to take the opportunity and engage in, and then we partner with them.
What is it exactly? Like a neighborhood association, or?
Yeah, so it's a program through the county that allows small communities to have. It's almost like a combination of a neighborhood watch and a grant program. So it enables small communities to get access to county money. The sheriff's office, I just heard the sheriff talk a brief time ago about, I think there's $100,000 in grants that he gives to communities.
Opens October 15th.
The county does the same thing. So these smaller communities, a lot of times there are communities that maybe have some crime problems and are trying to resolve those. It allows us to meet on a regular basis. They establish a group of folks that lead that are the mouthpiece for the community. And it allows all of the public partners, to include the sheriff's office, to come to the table on a regular basis and address issues. And it also gives us direct contacts when we have issues back and forth to communicate. And that helps resolve so many issues. So the biggest challenge I have right now is trying to get folks to grab onto this opportunity, because it really benefits them.
So you've been doing this 25 years or so?
26 in July, yeah.
So how has this job changed, do you think, since you started? And what are you noticing as captain of Sector 3? And you touched on this a little bit with technology, but how have things changed since you started on patrol?
Oh, technology obviously is the biggest change. And I would say that most of the changes revolve around technology and efficiency and asset allocation and deployment and all those things. So many positive things that I've seen change in my time as a police officer. First of all, body-worn cameras. You won't find a bigger advocate of body-worn cameras than I. They have changed the way we do policing. They have changed the way that we can review conduct of our personnel. They also have changed the way that cases can be prosecuted. And it's all 100% favorable. Intelligence-led policing, we've been doing that for probably 15 years or so now, where we have regular meetings as a complete entity. We're discussing crime trends, and those crime trends determine how we allocate resources towards different geographic areas that are experiencing problems. We didn't used to do any of that. We didn't used to collect data in computer systems that we can easily research and try to figure out what the problems are like we can now. All of that stuff has made us a much more efficient and much more professional organization. And, we used to fly kind of blind, just call to call. But now we actually can look at things and determine what the best way to handle, not just where the problems are, but also what the best way to handle those problems is.
So as we sort of get closer to your 1-year anniversary here as captain of Sector 3, maybe look ahead 2 years, 3 years. If you're still the captain here, what do you hope to achieve in that amount of time?
Well, as you know, we're in the middle of, we're in the process of changing our computer aided dispatch program. So that will change the geography of the county and how things are broken up, how sectors are broken up, asset allocations, and all of those things. So when I'm looking forward a year, 2 years, I'm considering what my asset allocation will be, right? So when this changes, Sector 3 will no longer have any of Pine Hills.
Okay.
The northern boundary for me will be the East-West Expressway. So that makes Sector 1 a lot bigger, but it also will allow me to take a lot of the resources that I have and make it more of a deputy in a community instead of currently because our sector boundaries and our geography is it's decades and decades old, right? When the map was drawn, and it has never changed. Horizons West is a great example of that. If you go to Sector 2, you can look at Avalon.
Yeah, and Sector 2 is the east side of the county, the largest sector. It's basically everything east of
Right.
I-4. I mean, maybe not that. Maybe
It's 436.
436, yeah, Cimarron. So everything east of there, a huge swath of land.
So those two areas, Horizons West and Avalon on the east side, that was ranch land, grove land, right? When I started, there was nothing really east of Alafaya until you get to Bithlo, which is a small, sleepy town in Christmas, and there was nothing in between. Here, everything on the southwest portion of the county, I mean, I used to ride my motorcycle through 545 and 535, and it was nothing but a meandering road through ranch land. Now it's a metropolis. So if you the asset allocation with the redrawing of the maps is going to allow me to place more resources on a smaller community basis and allow deputies to get more of an individual personal knowledge over a smaller piece of geography, and I'm really looking forward to that.
These are probably the things they don't teach you at the police academy.
No, these are things that you learn as you go. But all of that stuff is very positive. The community should really be enthused about those kind of things as well, because once the staffing comes up even higher in the smaller geography, a deputy will be responsible for a smaller piece of land, if you will, and really get to know people on an individual basis in those communities, and that's good for everybody.
Well, Captain Ela, thanks for chatting with me here on Behind the Star.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.